Good afternoon, everybody, and welcome to our Wednesday afternoon study group. Today, we're going to begin our class slightly different. We're going to read together some of the Psalms from the book of Tehillim. And this is obviously for the situation going on at the very present time in Eretz Yisrael. As I'm sure you've all seen and heard and seen on social media and from friends sending you pictures of what's going on today all throughout Eretz Yisrael. It started with Jerusalem, but it quickly spread, and literally there's no part of Eretz Yisrael that is not under threat. I believe the numbers I saw were that 70% of all of Israeli citizens found themselves in bomb shelters over the last 48 hours. So that's a considerable threat that the country and its citizens and its members of the IDF are facing. This began as an excuse by its enemies, using Yom Yerushalayim as the excuse, trying to find any excuse for beginning hostilities. But for those that have been following the news somewhat over the last 30 days, perhaps you may have seen really what is behind this, at least what started it. It always takes a spark to start something, and then once the spark begins, it's very hard to put out the fire. And so there was scheduled elections for the Palestinian Authority that was scheduled to take place just about now. The leader of the Palestinian Authority is someone by the name of Mahmoud Abbas, and his main opposition is Hamas. Neither are good as far as when it comes to Israel. They're both involved in terrorism, and they both have blood on their hands, and they both have Jewish blood on their hands. But power in the Palestinian Authority, especially with the change of the administration and the decision to once again fund the Palestinian Authority, means control of millions and millions of dollars. And as we have seen in our history of studying the Palestinians, first the PLO under Arafat and then the Palestinian Authority under Abbas, it's the leaders that line their pockets with all of these funds, whether it comes from the United States or the United Nations or other countries of the world. And it never trickles down to the people. You never see these millions of dollars being used to open up food banks and to give out food and to rebuild condominiums and to make nice apartments or to make nice schools. You never see it. And yet, over the years, billions of dollars have been given to this political party, and no results have shown for it. And therefore, in this upcoming election, the polls showed that Abbas was going to suffer a bitter defeat and literally be thrown out of power. If you're thrown out of power, you don't have access to any of the funds. The polls showed that Hamas was going to win an overwhelming victory. Again, not necessarily is that good for Israel, but at least we will be able to show the world this is who we're living with. And this is who you want us to make peace with. It's ultimately Hamas that's controlling it. So what Abbas did is he postponed the elections. He pushed it off indefinitely so that he would not face this defeat. And he used various different excuses because they still didn't work out with Israel, whether the Palestinians that live in Jerusalem would be able to vote there, if they'll have to go to a different ballot place. I mean, literally using some silly bureaucracy as the excuse for postponing the election. And then he basically instigates that on Yom Yerushalayim, there should be this uprising against Israel and against Yerushalayim. And anytime there is a type of uprising, what it does is it rallies the support, and suddenly your popularity goes up. So Abbas being seen as leading this opposition and leading this new intifada against Eretz Yisrael boosts his popularity, and his hope obviously then is that that will translate to votes when he decides to call for the election and therefore keep him in power. And the world basically just looks at this as a score. You know, you always see it on the news reports. How many Israelis were killed? How many Palestinians were killed? Oh, more Palestinians were killed. Israel is the aggressor. And it's the silliness of world media, not really looking behind the scenes as to what is the cause of this, who is the guilty party. And of course, it's very quick to point the finger at Israel as the aggressor. I believe that I've never seen Eretz Yisrael and the Israeli people more united than they are as one. And understand this is a country that has gone through, I believe it's been 4 elections in the past 18 months perhaps. So it's been in a very divided state over the last few months. And yet today they all scream out in one voice that they are totally united behind their government's decision to fight back, behind the IDF, behind the Mossad, behind the Shin Bet, behind everyone that's involved in taking away power from Hamas and from the Palestinian Authority and protecting their citizens. For every single citizen of Israel has seen how unprovoked suddenly 1,000 missiles have rained over their heads, mostly coming from the Gaza. The Gaza is a piece of land that Israel voluntarily gave over to the Palestinians so that they can build housing. They did not build any housing. All they built was missile bases in order to lob missiles into innocent families in Eretz Yisrael. Keep in mind that in Israel, it's not just Jews that live, it's Jews and Arabs that live side by side in many communities. And these missiles are not just hitting Jewish homes, they're hitting Arab homes as well. But again, that's not something that the media is going to report to you. They're only going to report about the aggressive response and the strong response of Israel. That's what you're going to hear over and over. So pick your news sites well, pick those that will give you legitimate sources. Try to find news sources coming directly from Israel. Best is if you have friends living in Israel, get your news directly from them. Let them show you the pictures of the scenes that we have seen of the skies of Tel Aviv last night, which was just unbelievable. Literally, you're seeing hundreds of missiles coming in at a time, and you're seeing Israel's defense system working and trying to take down as many of these missiles as possible before they land and do any type of damage. Israel should be strong. That is our prayer. Israel should be resolute in their defense of their families, defense of their men, women, and children. Israel, Eretz Yisrael, should be protected by God Almighty and by their strength and by the very, very brave members, the men and the women of the IDF. These are our heroes today. These are our heroes of yesterday. These are our heroes tomorrow. These are individuals, young individuals, teenagers who put their lives on hold. They enter the military service and they're there to protect Eretz Yisrael. It is part of their essence of who they are. And so Hashem should protect each and every single one of them, that they should be successful in any of their missions, in any of their raids. And indeed, there should be peace that shall rain down upon Eretz Yisrael. And we should see no more pain, no more tsaros, no more hardship, no more war. And the ultimate victory would be a victory of Moshiach Tzidkenu, that Moshiach should come and bring an end to war in all parts of the world. So we're going to recite 3 Psalms, and then we're going to begin class. I do want to thank today's class as being sponsored by Lori and Jeff Goldshin. This is in honor of their new grandson, Mazel Tov, Jeff and Lori, born to their son and daughter-in-law, Jared and Elizabeth Goldshin. You should have lots of nachas from all your grandchildren, lots of nachas from all of your children, lots of nachas from your entire family. Thank you very much, Lori and Jeff. I'm going to put up on the screen 3 Psalms. We're going to do Psalm 20, Psalm 23, and Psalm 130. And then we're going to go on with our regular scheduled class. So although I know you're muted, you can still read it out loud together with me. First, Psalm 20. For the conductor, a song of David. May the Lord answer you on a day of distress. May the name of the God of Jacob fortify you. May he send your aid from his sanctuary, and may he support you from Zion. May he remember all your meal offerings, and may he accept your fat burnt offerings forever. May he give you as your heart desires, and may he fulfill all your counsel. Let us sing praises for your salvation, and let us assemble in the name of our God. May the Lord fulfill all your requests. Now I know that the Lord saved his anointed. He answered him from his holy heavens with the mighty acts of salvation from his right hand. These trust in chariots and these in horses, but we mention the name of the Lord our God. They kneel and fall, but we rise and gain strength. Lord, save us. May the King answer us on the day we call. Psalm 23, known to many, a song of David. The Lord is my shepherd, I shall not want. He causes me to lie down in green pastures. He leads me beside still waters. He restores my soul. He leads me in the path of righteousness for his name's sake. Even when I walk in the valley of darkness, I will fear no evil, for you are with me. Your rod and your staff, they comfort me. You set a table before me in the presence of my adversaries. You anointed my head with oil, my cup overflows. May only goodness and kindness pursue me all the days of my life, and I will dwell in the house of the Lord for the length of days. And then we'll do Psalm 130. A song of ascents from the depths I have called out to you, O Lord. Lord, hearken to my voice. May your ears be attentive to the voice of my supplications. God, if you keep a record of iniquities, O Lord, who will stand? For forgiveness is with you, in order that you be feared. I hoped, O Lord, yea, my soul hoped, and I wait for his word. My soul is to the Lord among those who await the morning, those who await the morning. Israel, hope to the Lord, for kindness is with the Lord, and much redemption is with him, and he will redeem Israel from all their iniquities. We are studying the book of Devarim. The book of Devarim is Moses' speech to the Jewish people as they get ready to enter into the promised land. I find it interesting and noteworthy, and I hope Moses up above in heaven has a little bit of a chuckle, that we have studied the speech of Moses for longer than it took Moses to actually teach it in real life. The amount of time that he spent at the shores of at the riverbanks of the Jordan, getting the Jewish people ready to cross the Jordan, we have surpassed that by 10 times already. But we take every word of Moses very seriously, and we study it, and we try to incorporate it into our lives. So Moses, up above in heaven, thank you for teaching us. Thank you for inspiring us. Thank you for showing us what it means to be a member of God's chosen people. And we hope that you have nachas from us as we strive to understand your words and your mission statement to us. The last verse that we studied was about loving the convert. The Torah uses the word ger, which means a convert, but ger is also used in the Torah to talk about the stranger, and ger is also used in the Torah to talk about the immigrant. The Torah has a great sensitivity to the immigrant. And in various verses in the Torah, it talks about the mitzvah that we have to care for the immigrant. In the book of Exodus, it says, there shall be one law for the native and the immigrant who lives among you. Don't create one set of laws for the natives and one set of laws for the immigrants. Don't discriminate against them. Treat them as you treat your own. Over and over in the story of Passover, we find the words that we must remember that we were strangers in the land of Egypt. We were the immigrants. And we can't forget what it felt like to be oppressed by our host country. They turned on us. At first, they loved us. Why did they love us? Because we had Joseph. But then they forgot Joseph, and they oppressed us. They discriminated against us. They enslaved us. Why us? We were the immigrants. And so over and over in the story of Exodus, especially as we come out of Egypt, God will say, you can't forget the messages, the lessons that you have learned by being oppressed, by being slaves. Perhaps that was the reason God sent us there in the first place, so that when we would come out of it, we would come out as a people with a different sensitivity. There's a different part of the way we think because of where we came from, how we came from it, how we suffered. Don't let others, not just yourself, don't let others suffer like you suffered. So discrimination is something we have faced, not just in Egypt, but we know discrimination because of history. And therefore, we always need to be the first to speak out against discrimination, especially discrimination against the immigrant. Passover is about cultivating the crucial emotion of empathy, especially when it comes to seeing life through the eyes of the immigrant, or the asylum seeker, or the refugee, as people who have suffered oppression, not only in biblical times, but throughout all of our history, we are instructed consistently not to attack immigrants, not with rhetoric, not with any discriminatory policy, because we felt that pain. We know what it's like. Interesting, no? The first instruction to Abraham was Lech Lecha. The very first godly instruction to Abraham in the Bible is be an immigrant. Lech Lecha. Leave your homeland. You're going to wander. You're going to be an immigrant. You're going to go through the experience of being an immigrant, and you're going to build yourself up from that. But that experience is to be ingrained in your children and your grandchildren and in all those that will be your seed, because it will be critical for the world to have a nation that understands what it feels like to be an immigrant. Here in our chapter in the book of Deuteronomy, we have the positive commandment. Love the foreigner in your midst. And we have negative commandments against oppressing or perverting justice for them in any way. Jewish tradition reminds us over and over not to follow in the ways of the people that lived in the land of Sodom. If you remember from the book of Genesis, God wipes out the cities of Sodom, 5 cities that he will wipe out. Even though Abraham will come to this strong defense, begging God not to act out upon his decree, God will say, I have no choice. I have to do this. Sodom was the paradigm of an evil society as described in the book of Genesis. What was their evil? Besides for their evil between themselves, what stood out the most and what God could no longer tolerate was their cruelty to strangers. And they passed a law, and they made a proclamation. Anyone who strengthens the hand of the poor and the needy and the stranger with a loaf of bread will be put to death. There's no charity in Sodom. You can't make it here, get out of our city. You're an immigrant, get out of our city, we don't want you here. And they would literally put to death anyone, any sodomite that violated this command and was caught feeding an immigrant, feeding a stranger. And that God said, I can't let that survive. To pass legislation of cruelty. It's one thing that there happens to be a people, and within a nation, you're going to have cruel people. But to legislate cruelty, to make it part of the law of the land that you must be cruel, to make it part of the land that it's a violation of our law if you are kind, God says there's no place for that in the world. And we are instructed and told to remember Sodom, remember what happened. Why does it want us to remember it? Not because we are going to become like Sodom, because we may close our eyes to other nations becoming like Sodom. Always remember, be kind to the immigrant, be kind to the stranger, because you are there. As Jews, our ancestors have been eternal immigrants from Abraham to Ellis Island. You know, I'm forever grateful that when fleeing Hitler Yamach Shemai and anti-Semitism in Poland, my father found refuge, first for a little bit of time in Lithuania. And then when he needed to leave Lithuania through the help of Chiun Sugihara, and he got a visa, he lived in Kobe, Japan. He was able to escape Lithuania and end up in Japan as an immigrant. And then when Japan got involved in the war and the Jews needed to get out real quickly, he was an immigrant yet again in Shanghai, China. And then ultimately, years later, he was able to get a visa to come to the United States of America. In all of these places, he was an immigrant. He was a stranger. He didn't belong. And if people weren't kind to him along the way, he never would have survived. He would not have been the lone survivor of his entire family. He would have been just one more number on the list. If it wasn't for Chiun Sugihara, who cared about these immigrants and cared about these Jews, they would not have survived. If it wasn't for the people in Kobe, Japan, who allowed them in, who gave them a place to live, they wouldn't have survived. If it wasn't for the people in Shanghai, China, that allowed them a place of refuge while the world was exploding around them, while Jews were being hunted down and murdered and killed without any feeling of empathy. These countries were there. And although Japan and Shanghai played a big role in saving his life, what they didn't do was ever create a home for him. So I bless them for their kindness in allowing the immigrant to remain safe. But they never said, this is your home. They allowed survival, which was critical. Very few countries did, and for that, I am eternally grateful. But it wasn't home. The United States of America made it a home for my father. She adopted my father. And my father adopted the United States. And I'm a proud American, very proud American. I put aside any political differences we may have from one party to the next party. But this country gave my father a home. And thus there is us, there are children, there are grandchildren, there are great-grandchildren, there are great-great-grandchildren. We are the descendants of Jewish immigrants. And we are forever in debt to this country for being that shining light and a nation of kindness to our parents and our grandparents. Now, it's not all just glory. There's a lot of fault that one can say, especially when you study the history of those difficult days. We would have wished that it was sooner. We would have wished that they opened the floodgates and allowed 100 times the amount of European Jewry in. We would have wished that this country took action years before they actually did. We would have wished that vessels with Jewish immigrants that came to the shores of this land would have been allowed to have the Jews on these ships disembark. You're all familiar, I'm sure, with the famous story of the SS St. Louis with 1,000 Jews on board. First made its way to Cuba. Cuba wouldn't let them out, then came to this country, to Florida. And the President of the United States would not allow them to disembark. So there you have 1,000 of our brothers and sisters on a ship on the dock in Florida. You were able to scream to them, and they couldn't come off that ship and save their lives. The SS St. Louis then went to Canada, and the same result there, and ultimately had to go back to Germany. And many of them never survived. So we would have wished the story would have been a little bit different. And when the war was over, we would have wished that they allowed many more to enter and more rapidly. So I'm not going to sugarcoat it all and say everything, the policy were all great. But at the same time, even if the numbers were smaller than we had hoped, and even if it was later than we had hoped, the fact is many of our parents and grandparents were immigrants to this country and made this country their home, and this country adopted them. And yes, at first life here was difficult. Many spoke no English. They spoke Polish, they spoke German, they spoke Hungarian. They didn't speak English. Many didn't know a trade. And there was also much anti-Semitism to contend with. As much as I speak, as far as I wish the country and the administration would have taken in more, there were many in opposition of don't allow these Jews in. We don't want the Jews taking over our country. We don't want the Jews taking over our jobs. We just don't want the Jews. But we were a hardworking people. And we took jobs. and we learned skills, and we learned the language, and we excelled. You know, there are very few movie clippings of the previous Lubavitcher Rebbe, Rabbi Yosef Yitzchak Schneerson. The previous Rebbe arrived in this country in 1940. He passed away in 1950. There's a few video clips, a few, 8mm films out there. There are some pictures, but not that many. And yet I find fascinating that the day that the previous Rebbe, Rabbi Yosef Yitzchak Schneerson, was sworn in as an American citizen, that entire ceremony was filmed. And he wanted it filmed. He wanted it to be known that he was proud to be an American. And so you see him taking the oath of becoming a citizen, and you see this on film, and you see the pride in his face of this country, that this country allowed him to become a citizen of the United States. And his son-in-law, the Rebbe, spoke always in terms of the United States in the most glowing of words. He spoke about Artzos Habris. He called it the land of the covenant. Isn't that interesting? An interesting name for this country. It's the land of the covenant, because we're the people of the covenant. And he would call this the land of the covenant. What covenant was he referring to? He was referring to the Constitution. He gave holiness to the Constitution. This is the land of the Constitution. Because what the Constitution does is it allows its human beings, its citizens, to be free. This was the country that gave millions of Jews a safe haven. And it gave us the freedom, and it still gives us the freedom to study Torah. We may say, of course it does, but it wasn't always that way in other countries. It gave us the freedom to practice mitzvot. We're so used to it that we take it for granted, but it wasn't always that way for our ancestors in the countries that they came from. It allows us to keep Shabbat. You know, the first wave of immigrants, when they came here, their biggest struggle was Shabbat, because the stores on the east side insisted if you want a job here, you're going to have to work on Shabbat. And they faced great struggles. Our parents and grandparents faced difficult dilemmas, difficult decisions to make. If they needed to earn a living, what should they do? They kept Shabbos. They didn't want to give up Shabbos. What should they do about it? When my father came to this country, he told me that that was the greatest challenge facing American Jewry. That every single American Jew spoke about this, as what are they going to do about Shabbos if their place of work insists that they work on Shabbos? Think about how far we've come in this country now, that you cannot be discriminated against if you want to keep Shabbos. Think about kosher, how easy it is to be kosher in this country. It wasn't always this way. We don't have to hide to be Jewish. We don't have to hide to be proud of being Jewish. We don't have to be afraid of a pogrom. I know there's still anti-Semitism in the country, but don't confuse the anti-Semitism in our country today with what pogroms were all about. Literally, Jewish communities went to sleep afraid, will there be a community tomorrow morning? Will it all be wiped out with government support, just coming in and just destroying and burning down a community? They lived with that. And here we live with respect and with honor. Is there any field whatsoever in this country that a Jewish child of an immigrant has not entered and has not been accepted? In any field you can think of, economically, educationally, politically, medically, in every single field, children of immigrants, grandchildren of immigrants have become part of the very fiber of this country. It's indeed one nation under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Now, I know we have our share of differences, and I'm sure even in our group that's studying together right now, we all have different political slants. And immigration is a hot subject. It's a hot political subject. It's specifically when you talk immigration today, you're all thinking primarily about immigration coming from Mexico, coming from some of the other South American countries. But immigration is a bigger word than just one border. Immigration is the idea that other people from other countries can join together and that can make that move and that change if they feel it's for a better life for them and for their families. Immigration is in itself a good thing. Now, it can go bad with bad policy. And immigration has a lot of delicacies to it, a lot of sensitivities to it. It's not a simple subject. And we need good immigration policy that on one hand protects the United States, but on the other hand, continues the theme of the United States, of what the Statue of Liberty is all about welcoming people in from all over the world and making them part and living as proud American citizens here in this country. The discussion about immigration itself and on a Jewish slant, so to say, of this discussion should not be based on economic issues. Because economic issues is not the only thing that defines the identity of the United States. We have to get into really, what does this country represent? What does it mean to be loyal to this nation? What is it that we want of the loyalty of the immigrant coming in? What is it that we ask of them? What do we ask of them? How to become part of the mutual responsibility of building this country? There are deeper questions here. And I'm afraid we have turned it into just this political warfare where we can use it to score points against the other political party. Immigration will always be an important part of a political discourse. Ever since I've been a child, it's been discussed as part of policy. But we have to be vigilant in the way we frame the issues and the rhetoric that we use when we debate them. It should be open for debate, and there should be the wisest, brightest people coming together to trying to figure out a way to make this work. But there's no place in this debate for prejudice against the immigrant. And this appeal that you often have, this instinct to bring about fear of the immigrant is going to take you over. We face that. We've been through that. We know what that feels like. Caricatures of Jews, of what they're going to do if you allow them in your neighborhood. Right? Don't let Jews here. Don't let blacks here. We know what that feels like. And I'm saying again, immigration is not just on one border. Immigration is a general understanding of what this country is based upon and how it could handle additional citizens and how those citizens could move here with respect and this ability to mold it into one nation. It's a genuine debate. It's a fair debate, and it needs to be an honest debate. But it has to be conducted with wisdom. You need smart people involved in it, non-political people, not looking to score points. It needs to be made by people of generosity, feel that there is an element of the United States that was based upon the principles of generosity and kindness, not just to its own citizens, but like the Jewish people were to be a light unto the nations. This country was also based on the idea of bringing blessings to humanity. And it also has to be based on restraint, not to allow this discussion to become a hateful discussion, because it's an important discussion. I find it so interesting that the Torah addresses immigration numerous times. And it talks to us about immigration, and it tells us to welcome the immigrant and to be kind to the immigrant. So we do have a lot of work to do. And again, I come to it, and I'm sure many of you come to it from a very different perspective than the politics of it, but from a human perspective of existence. I am here because of an immigration policy of this country. That's why I'm here, because my father was allowed in. And I know you're going to say, yes, but he waited his turn, and yes, he waited for years, and yes, this. I understand that. So we need good policy. And of course, I would have wished that my father would not have to wait 4 years in Shanghai to get the visa to come in. And I'm sure we all wish that it would have been able to happen earlier. Do you have that same wish when if it's people from another country and another faith and another religion? How do you feel? And who decides the numbers? And who draws that red line and say, we're going to allow in only X amount, but not more than that? These are tough questions. I don't have easy answers. I'm not that individual that I said that we need people with wisdom, generosity, and restraint. I don't think I want to sit at that table and come up with policy because I'm not smart enough. But there are people in this country that can be smart enough to come up with a policy that works, that's kind, that's generous, and at the same time protects the citizens of our country. I read an article by Rabbi Jonathan Sachs of blessed memory, and this article became the subject of a book he wrote. I think it's, let me get the name of the book, give me 1 second. It's called The Home We Build Together. You may want to order the book. But it's an interesting read. I have a few minutes left. I just want to share with you the gist of what the book is about. And it's about immigration, and it's the subject of immigration, but more focusing on what do we do once there is immigration? How do a people keep their identity on one hand and become part of the new community on the other hand? What is it that you want? Do you want them to forget their heritage? Do you want them to forget their language? Do you want them to forget their culture and only be American or whatever country it may be that they're going into? Or do you want them to keep their heritage? And if so, how do you blend it? Again, think about us as the Jewish people. Did the United States want us to forget our past, assimilate and just become American and drop the Jewish? Did they want us to stop speaking Hebrew or Yiddish and only speak English? Did they want us to give up the kippah because it separated us? These are legitimate questions. So Rabbi Sachs paints a few different models of what countries have tried and why they have failed. The first was the European experiment, and he gives it a name. Okay, he said this came in the 19th century, and we'll call it the country house model. Okay, I'll paint the model for you. Imagine 100 immigrants turn up in the countryside at the gate of an enormous country house. The owner of the house, this aristocrat, greets all the new arrivals with a warm, welcoming smile. I'm so happy to see all of you. Let me count. There's 100 of you. Well, guess what? I have 100 spare bedrooms. Every one of you, pick a bedroom. It's yours. And you can stay as long as you like. All good, right? Kindness, right? He's got a big estate. He's got 100 strangers in front of him. Every one of you pick a room. You're all welcomed here. You can stay as long as you like. What was the trouble with the country house model? It was that the host always remained the host and the guest always remained the guest. It never became the guest's home. The guest remained the guest forever. The guest was happy at first because I have a free room, but the guest will always remain a guest. So in 19th century Europe, immigrants found refuge, but they were always the outsiders. They were always guests. And what happens is, perhaps this aristocrat is very kind and giving to his guests, but there's no proof that the next generation is going to be as kind as and giving. And so when you came to the 20th century, and Germany and Austria and France and other European countries decided one way or another that we don't really want these guests here anymore. It was nice having them for the last 100 years, but you're not welcome here anymore because you're still a guest And it's our home. It's our country. And that's the seeds of the Holocaust right there. And that's why there was no protest from the general population, because a Jew, even though they were friendly with the Jew, or it was the Jewish doctor, or it was their Jewish lawyer, or it was their Jewish neighbor, you're still the guest. You're never really one of us. And so when Hitler comes to power and the Nazis come to power and they convinced their citizens, we don't want the guests here anymore, it was easy for everyone to turn on them because you were always the guest. So in America, they tried something different. In the 19th and early 20th century, there was a different model. And you're familiar with this model. You're familiar with the words. It was called the melting pot. The melting pot. It was a Broadway play. There was a book called The Melting Pot. Into the pot went all the immigrants. Whoever comes in, you're Irish, in the pot. Italians, in the pot. Jews, get in the pot. And out came something different. They made a cholent of us all, right? They put us all in the pot. They wanted, if we all got cooked together, we're all going to come out Americans. That was the theory. So what happened? We came out hyphenated Americans. There was Irish Americans, Italian Americans, Jewish Americans, African Americans. So we had all different hyphenated Americans. We didn't become a national identity as they thought we would. What you had is all different now interest groups. The African American has their interest and their lobby. The Jewish Americans have their groups, the Anti-Defamation League and this groups, and the Irish Americans have their groups. We didn't all become one. We kept our identity, but we're competing with one another. We're fighting with one another as to whose interests will matter most. And so who has better lobbyists? Who has more influence in government? Because we still keep to our hyphenated groups. So in the 1970s, Europe and America turned to a new model. And the new model we're going to call the hotel model. Okay? Different than the country house. Imagine 100 immigrants turn up in the town. The leader of the town says, welcome, please come, stay in one of our hotels. That's where you're going to live. All you have to do is pay the bill. If you pay the bill, you're free to do whatever you want in your room as long as the noise is kept low so it doesn't disturb the other guests. Just pay your bill. Pay your bill, close the door of your room. I couldn't care less what you do in that room as long as it doesn't interfere with anyone else. This was the strategy known as multiculturalism. It was meant to cure the problems that the country house model had. It was meant to cure the problems of the melting pot. Everyone was free to keep your own identities, do what you want, live in your own room. I don't care if you're a native, I don't care if you're a newcomer, you're all on the same terms. You all pay for your room, just pay your taxes. You pay your taxes, I couldn't care less what you do. And in return, you each have your own room and you have your own hotel service and all good. The only trouble with the hotel model was that now no one belongs because a hotel is not a home. And it upset everybody. And it didn't bring about any collective identity because we were all now really divided into different groups, different hotel rooms. All you wanted from government, the government wanted from you, pay your taxes. Hotel guests don't constitute a community. You don't feel a sense of community with the people down the hallway in a hotel. It's a temporary state. I go for business, I stay in a hotel. I go to visit family and friends and they don't have a place for me, I stay in a hotel, right? You're going on a vacation, you stay in a hotel. You don't call that community. You call it privacy, you have a place to sleep, but it's not an existence. Multiculturalism was supposed to make everyone feel at home, but in the end, it made no one feel at home. It was supposed to lead to integration, but really what it led to was segregation. Where does he go with all of this, Rabbi Sachs? He goes to the title of this new book that came out when he wrote this article. The New Model, he called it, and it's inspired by Judaic teachings. The home we build together, he called it. 100 immigrants turn up in the town. Leaders of the town say, welcome. We're sorry, we don't have a country house here for you. That we don't have a room for each of you. We don't even have a hotel. And we're not throwing you in a pot. We're not making a cholent out of you. This is what we have. We have some spear land. We have some building materials. We know some architects and some electricians. So why don't you get involved in building a house together with them? So even if you come from a different culture, call the electrician that may come from a different group. And call the plumber that may come from a different group. And together learn to build a house. So the natives and the newcomers will work together side by side. And in the course of building, the newcomers learns all about the life of the natives. And the native learns all about the life of the newcomer. Each one is learning about the other's traditions and the other's ways. They're not becoming the other. No one's trying to convert the other. We're trying to learn from each other's cultures, learn about it, become educated people. It's not a threat to us that there are people that come from different cultures and different backgrounds and different faiths. And each one has a gift to give. One's an electrician, one's a plumber, one knows how to put 2x4s together. One knows how to lay carpet, one knows how to put down tile. And if you guys figure out how to work together, you know, you can build a beautiful house. And if you can build one beautiful house, then you can build 100 beautiful houses. And then you can build a beautiful neighborhood. And you can live side by side in this neighborhood. You see, the model of this society, of the home that we build together, emphasizes that we each have responsibility towards the other, not rights. We're not here to demand rights. You owe me. No. We have a responsibility to each other. And it values the differences between us, because the differences don't have to keep us apart, but rather they mean that we each have something different, special to give to the common good. And the town grows. And there's a Chinese kosher restaurant and an Italian kosher restaurant and an American kosher restaurant and a junk food kosher restaurant, because we like some stuff from different cultures. We keep our own. We keep our own traditions. We keep our own faith. We don't have to give it up just because we're in America. But there's a lot about other Americans that we would love to learn from. Perhaps from their mistakes, perhaps from their successes. It doesn't threaten us. And we don't have to threaten the natives. By us being here, we become part of your country. We're not here to take over your country. We're not here to take away your country. This is the model. This is where the Torah is pointing us. This is the direction that we are to take when we even think about what does this country mean and what should its policy be when it comes to welcoming immigrants from other countries. Very clearly, the commandment from Moses, the immigrant that's already here, treat them with respect. If you have a housekeeper, do you know anything about their family? Do you know their children's names? Do you know their children's birthdays? The person that works for you that may be an immigrant, how well do you know them? How much do you appreciate them? Those of you that know our organization here, I have someone that's worked for me for 25 years. His name is Hector Contreras. Hector Contreras is as important member of my staff as anyone else. He's as loyal to me and I'm as loyal to him. We have a relationship. The fact that he came from another country doesn't take away who his identity is. In fact, it adds to it. He has a different culture. He learns from us. He knows all about Judaism. He knows all about davening. He knows all the Yiddish words. I beg him not to consider converting to Judaism, because then he's not going to be able to work for me on Shabbos and Yantif. But that's just a joke. If he converts, we'll take him in. But he's a wonderful fellow, a wonderful human being, and I'm very happy that this country has welcomed him in and he has become part of this country. And I'm sure the same in all of your lives and all of your experiences. Be kind to the immigrant. Welcome the immigrant. So we have to move it out of the political. I'm sure I made a lot of people upset today with my talk, but I want to remove it from the political discussion and bring it more into, I would say, a religious discussion, a philosophical discussion. And perhaps from there we can come with better policy. Everyone have a wonderful, wonderful week, have a wonderful Shabbat. And this Sunday night is the holiday of Shavuot. It's Sunday night, Monday, and Tuesday. This year, unlike last year, we're going to be able to have holiday services for you, including holiday lunches. It'll all be held outdoors, so it's safe. And hopefully you got your shots already and you're feeling good about going out. So please do join us. Sunday night, we're going to do a midnight at 12 midnight Torah study class. That's part of the tradition of the holiday. You're all welcome to come here at midnight, 12 o'clock. Monday morning, be here at 9:30. We're going to read the 10 Commandments at 10:30. Then we're going to give all the children ice cream cones with all different types of toppings. And then at about 11:30, we're going to give all the adults ice cream too. You're also going to get cheesecake and lasagna and pizza and eggplant parmesan and everything you can think of in the dairy menu. We invite you all to join us for lunch. Tuesday, we start at 9:30 a.m. And Tuesday, we do recite Yizkor. Once again, we're going to have lunch for you. So a very, very happy holiday of Shavuot, a Shabbat Shalom. I look forward to seeing you back next week for the continuation of the book of Deuteronomy. Take care, everyone. Have a great, great week.